Do you want me to do an introduction?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and give an introduction. Katie Hernandez is here with us tonight at the Office of Economic Development to give a 5:30 presentation to the Commission on an item that is on your agenda tonight for the Southeast 14th Street Urban Renewal Plan. 5:30 sessions, informational sessions, so that's why we're not too worried about, who's here yet or not. But we just think it's a good opportunity to go, a little more in depth, take a little time. We got about 30 minutes. We don't have to use it all if there's, we get through it. But with that, I'll turn it over to Katie, and you can walk us through the project. So.
Sounds good. Can you hear me okay? Katie Hernandez, Office of Economic Development for the City of Des Moines. We are proposing a new urban renewal plan along the commercial corridor of Southeast 14th. I'll kind of go through some of the geographic information and the proposal related to goals for activities within the plan area, and just some process information as well. So urban renewal plan, I think this has probably seen a handful of these items come through this board or commission. The urban renewal plan is a long-term plan that includes a map of the area, legal description, plan objectives, relationship to the comp plan, and then a description of each urban renewal project that is within the urban renewal boundary. Urban renewal it facilitates tax increment financing, which is one of the few and major economic development tools that cities have within the state of Iowa. We also utilize tax abatement, which is a little bit more flexible and widely used. So that's typically what we talk through first with any development activity if it's applicable. Purpose of urban renewal plans, again, like I said, it's urban renewal plans facilitate the use of TIF TIF is a tool that provides for public improvements, encourages economic investment within the urban renewal area. Related to that, retaining and growing employment related to those economic development activities, reducing slum and blight, and then inspiring rehabilitation and revitalization within the urban renewal area. I will make a note, urban renewal is dependent upon private investment, so it is really the private investment driving urban renewal. Related to process, urban renewal plans are required to go to Plan and Zoning Commission to make a recommendation as to conformity with the comprehensive plan or Plan DSM. So that is the reason that this item is on the agenda today. Getting into the plan specifics, location is, I'm not sure how well that's coming across your screen, but it is just to the north of the intersection of East Park Avenue and Southeast 14th, and then it goes down Southeast 14th and just to the northern boundary of East Army Post right-of-way. It's about 440 acres, just a little under 200 non-right-of-way parcels. And it's mostly, again, like I said, commercial corridor, commercially focused parcels that we are proposing to bring into this urban renewal area. Again, the purpose is encouraging the removal of and redevelopment of blighted, obsolete, and underutilized properties, development and redevelopment of commercial, mixed use, and residential, creating and retaining jobs within the city of Des Moines, and providing a diversity of housing options. So just flipping to show you the commercial focus of this urban renewal area. This is the comprehensive plan, land use plan. Showing red is the commercial, or excuse me, community mixed use, and then business park. So mostly focusing on commercial here. Plan objectives, there's quite a few within this plan. I will kind of make an important note that this is a framework to use as we intend to encourage redevelopment within this urban renewal area. So these goals are very broad sweeping and really intending to tie the Plan DSM goals with this urban renewal area. So really we're focusing here on appropriate development and redevelopment opportunities, potential infrastructure improvements and opportunities, housing goals, community health and walkability, and then transit options. This is a transit corridor south of East Park. So again, quite a few plan objectives. I won't go through them one by one, but kind of drilling down into more detail of the broad sweeping goals of this plan. Kind of more related to the purpose of this part of the process for this proposed urban renewal area. These are the Plan DSM goals that are supported by this plan within this area. So land use goals, again, appropriate redevelopment opportunities along or within this urban renewal area. Affordable housing, mixed housing opportunities. Infrastructure and walkability opportunities, development and redevelopment opportunities through economic development activity. And then neighborhood character preservation and protection, and kind of the larger broad sweeping goal of social equity as it relates to the amenities along this commercial corridor. This is showing existing zoning, again trying to pull in the mixed use and commercial parcels along this Southeast 14th corridor. And again, the plan DSM map showing the same. And then you can also see the circles on the map. I didn't put them in my legend, but those are nodes identified through plan DSM. One important note to make, again, I said earlier, this is a broad sweeping urban renewal plan. We do not have articulated projects at this time within the urban renewal boundary. This is a little bit of a different approach that we're taking for this proposed urban renewal plan. Typically, projects are driving the need for urban renewal. In this case, we're introducing this plan as an act of encouraging encouraging private investment along this corridor. The timeline, so summer of 2022, our staff met with neighborhood associations that have their formal boundary within this proposed area. City Council set the date of public hearing on the October 3rd council meeting. We had the taxing entities consultation meeting yesterday, which is another requirement of the process. P&Z is today, and then the council hearing is set for November 7th as a public hearing. I just wanted to kind of show the current condition along Southeast 14th. So this is kind of more going south along Southeast 14th, just kind of looking at some infrastructure and some commercial properties, a lot of opportunity within this this proposed area. So vacancy and some greenfield, but most of this is going to be most of this will be infill, redevelopment, and development activity. Any questions on this urban renewal area? I have one more slide that kind of goes through the details of tax increment financing and how that is used as a tool for economic development. I think that's been covered at this commission meeting in the past, so I will spare you the details if you are already well versed on that. Yes. Okay. So tax increment financing, it's basically a model to capture new taxes as a result of any development or redevelopment project. Those are typically used for private development as an incentive. The city of Des Moines does a pretty thorough financial analysis of each project. So TIF is used as a last source in, as a way to make the project happen. TIF can also be used for public infrastructure improvements within the urban renewal area boundary. So the concept is setting the base, which is the orange portion, and that I refer to oftentimes as the pre-construction valuation. Everything in the light blue is new taxes as a result of development, redevelopment, new development on any given parcel. And then the dark blue is when that TIF rolls off or expires, that new growth in tax is released to all taxing entities. So that is kind of the concept, a broad concept of TIF, and kind of a insight on TIF as a concept for City of Des Moines use.
I've got 4 questions, or well, potentially 5. You identified that this one was a proactive urban renewal plan.
Correct.
What are the 3 other areas of the city that you're looking at proactively, and why did this one take priority over those others?
Can you be I'm not familiar with the other 3 areas. Did I mention?
Oh, I don't know either. That's why I'm trying to, are there any other places where we're proactively looking at this?
There is one
Okay.
area that will likely come before this commission. That one's not quite ready yet, but again, no articulated projects in the, that are proposed. It's really as a way to encourage and kind of lower the hurdle for any potential investment in the area.
So why is this a higher priority one than the other? What is it about this that's like, you know what, we should be proactive here versus somewhere else first?
If I could, and maybe you're going to go down this path, but I think from my perspective, there's been a lot of planning and push to see redevelopment on East 14th Street, Southeast 14th Street and it's not occurred. And so I think this is, as I understand it, this is seen as an opportunity to try to start something that we've been talking about for a long time, but have yet to really see anything happen. So so taking the unique circumstance of knowing, hey, this is a little different, but this is an area that's struggling, needs investment. How can we facilitate that? We've been talking about for a long time. I think if you were to, if we had neighbors that, from the neighborhood groups that you met with, they would speak to their concerns about both Army Post Road and Southeast 14th Street and just the general condition of, as long as I've worked here, it's been something that's, been talked about. So as far as how do we foster redevelopment on those corridors? So I think from my perspective, that's what's leading to staff starting this without a specific project in mind.
Right. And there have been case studies on Southeast 14th as far as potential for redevelopment. So we're just, and there's been push from council as well to get an urban renewal area in place to kind of be ahead of any proposed projects and kind of encourage that development within this area.
Okay, so we're saying that basically this area, we've tried a bunch, it isn't working. Other areas we haven't tried as much, so we're trying this one and it takes precedence over the other area we're talking about because like we were out of options and this is our next best choice. Is that generally what we're saying?
The tools that are available at any developer's disposal right now is tax abatement on this corridor. That's very widely available throughout the city boundary. That has not, we have not seen that to be the tool that has encouraged development along this corridor. So we're proposing this urban renewal as a way to encourage new development as best we can. So it allows us to have those conversations with the development community, and this is a tool that is now or would be available upon approval of the urban renewal.
What's the fundamental mechanism that, like, when you're looking at this, what's fundamentally different between tax abatement and a TIF as it would be used by the developer?
Tax abatement is more of a reduction of an expense line item to a developer year over year. So it's really kind of a suspension of taxes. TIF is a rebate, which, and I will also mention, to get in kind of into the nuance of TIF, TIF is not all tax, the full tax levy. The debt service levies are reduced from the full tax levy. So TIF is going to be typically 80 to 84% of the full tax levy. The remainder of that goes back to the taxing entities for their debt service. So tax abatement is looking at the full, it is basically a reduction of the taxes that you would pay as a result of that development project. TIF is a rebate in more of a monetary form.
Because right now, basically, as I'm understanding, in our like recent projects like Come and Go, they send in their full tax amount, we send all the money back. Is that generally how it's working right now in Des Moines?
I am not super familiar with that development agreement off the top of my head, but again, TIF is a net positive because it's 80 to 84% of whatever the full tax bill that is paid. So at a max, at a max incentive, it's not the full tax bill.
But I think also maybe part of your question too, in Des Moines, we use TIF as a rebate. It's not a cash up front. It's you perform and you get a rebate after you performed. And the value's actually been created. Is that the question?
Part of it, yeah, I guess. So there's a lot of commercial area here. So if you're saying, so if we actually got the full impact of this thing worked exactly spectacular as you wanted, right, which seems like it's heavily commercial, how many new or retained residents do we think this will actually either generate or retain who would then be, residential tax-paying citizens?
That is, I do not know the answer to that. I think that depends on the development that happens within the plan area. And we just don't know what that is at this point.
So we don't even have a dream of what we think the impact would be as far as residents retained or brought in?
As an articulated number, that has not been studied. I mean, we have goals for the plan for kind of redevelopment within the boundary of the plan. As far as project specifics and employment numbers, we don't have those at this point.
I'm just meaning based off historic. So what we're saying is even based off historicals, looking at past stuff, we really just have no way of saying, okay, well, hey, if we do this and ideally we're bringing in this level of commercial investment, right, which they aren't paying taxes on the extra benefit, right, for 20 years, right? We don't really know how many more residents will actually be paying for trash, paying for those things versus commuting in from Indianola or commuting in from Norwalk or somewhere else, considering this is a highly accessible area. It probably would be a useful area that could be commercial. We end up with commuters who now are working there, causing us cost, but not causing us benefit in the form that they won't be revenue-producing citizens.
That is, that would be something that's interesting to study. I don't know that it could be controlled within the confines of a development agreement to require employees to be residents of the city of Des Moines. I don't think our legal staff has looked into that.
Madam Chair, there might be, we don't have very much time left, and there might be other questions that other members of the commission would like to ask. I know I have one. I'd ask if Chris would yield his questions to someone else, me.
Let me throw out the three quickly, and pick which ones you want to answer. So 3 questions are, if fully realized, how much revenue will this project bring in over the next 20 years? Right, that's new revenue. Number 2, how do you intend to calculate and evaluate the URP's effectiveness with respect to your social equity item that you identified? Like, how do you even measure that? And the last one is, for the last 20 projects in Des Moines that are over 20 years old, you've got that dark blue portion there, right? What has been the actual impact of those last 20 projects? Has the actual tax base gone up as per this chart, or have we missed it? So those are my 3. If you want to answer any of them, fine. If you don't, I'll yield to Will.
Can you just briefly, so that Will can ask his question, briefly answer 1?
I am what was the first one?
Sorry.
I think they're in-depth enough questions that I don't know that we're in a position to answer them tonight.
Yeah, they sounded
I
pretty
think
complicated.
The first one was the full potential of the urban renewal area, and I think that's a really interesting thing to study. Being that this is a proactive urban renewal area, we don't know what the development's going to what the development is going to be. I think we could make inferences based on the zoning allowance and what the capacity, what the max build out could be on any given parcel. But that may or may not happen. It's market, a lot of this is market driven. So I think it's a difficult thing to put numbers.
In this conference, please wait.
But I think that, I guess my point is,
So-
are they in-depth questions? But yes, I've been asking for over a year. Swenson from Iowa State has done these studies. Have we looked into that? Because I've been told we don't know any experts that can do it. We've got two at Drake that I know can do this project. So I'm curious if we have a willingness to actually look into that. It is not that we lack the resources in town to do it. These are able to be known numbers based off history. I again think we should do that.
But I don't think Katie's in a position to talk about the broader policy and analysis and commitments to having in-depth, bringing in consultants to do in-depth analysis. I mean, we appreciate what you're saying, but I don't think it's fair for Katie to be put in the position to try to respond to that question, because that's not really her role. So
Quick answers to
Well,
Katie.
what are
May I ask my
Yeah.
question?
Well,
Mr.
what are
Chair?
Population,
yeah,
too.
I'm sorry, Chris. And sorry, Dory and Justin, I'm going to I think one of you said, oh, no one said anything. Okay, will you answer or ask your question?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think the city has done a good job of an analysis in terms of the blight and some along this corridor, and it's really quite an enlightening and rather depressing picture. However, if that same survey were done on the areas that are adjacent to the corridor, I think you'd find something quite different indeed. So what that says to me is that the plan actually has a good chance of succeeding because there is the demand there in the neighborhoods broader than the corridor itself to support economic development. What I'd like to ask you is this. Southeast 14th Street is a state, in fact, a very important state highway. It's not the only corridor in that state highway. It's an extension of East 14th Street and Northeast 14th Street further to the north. So my question is, these two corridors act together in concert with one another. And my question is, what is the city doing in terms of East 14th Street along this same line? Because anyone that reads the newspaper or watches the news or goes online for news knows that East 14th is experiencing a considerable amount of difficulty in terms of traffic, congestion, crime, and slum and blight. So my question is, what is the city of Des Moines doing along that line to improve the entire corridor?
Of East 14th. Some of your question, I think, pertains to infrastructure. I think there's a study for East Army Post to the south. I would have to follow up on studies for East 14th or specifically. I think the intention is overall improvement, and the goal of this plan, I think, meets that intention in a generic way. I don't, again, I'd have to follow up on infrastructure improvements, but I think economic development activity along this corridor can only positively improve what you have addressed with your question.
I appreciate you offering that, because this is a real concern for, a major part of the city. And if you would follow up along this line, and if the city would follow up along this line as well, I think that it would be a major benefit and a help for a part of the city that could use this help, and also a corridor that is experiencing a considerable amount of difficulty. Thank you.
And I think we do have an urban renewal area that's up based off of Euclid, the kind of Grandview College, whole avenue to the north. So I think there has been some tools put into place, and I know we've been.
Is there time for additional questions?
2 minutes till the meeting starts.
All right, thanks. Along the lines of Will's point, my question relates to, this is a state highway, and a lot of the things that I saw in the report were multimodal transportation related. I think you mentioned a couple of those as well. does this give us a little more leverage with the state to have some of those transportation multimodal infrastructure projects along this stretch? Because it seems like that's the biggest challenge whenever we're, as a city, we're trying to improve a roadway that's a state highway.
Potentially. The investment, urban renewal, I guess TIF proceeds can be used for public infrastructure. That may be as a result of a large amount of improvement or investment within the proposed urban renewal area. But that's, again, I think, more kind of in line with our engineering staff and the CIP, the budget committed to improvement along Southeast 14th. But I think having this plan in place kind of bolsters the argument for improvements along Southeast 14th in several different ways.
Sure.
Can staff also understand how the DOT's 69 study meshes with this? Because I think that addresses most of the question, most of the questions. And it was completed, I think, last year.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it enough to really talk about it. I don't know, are you familiar with it?
No, but we can follow up on.
I mean, I think there was a significant amount of investment for improving the highway and access down the corridor that will impact this.
Okay. Good point.
I'm just curious.
No, I think that's a fair question. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for it.
There's just something bigger out there.
It's proximate to the airport.
Okay. Southwest 9th, is that on your radar?
No, not for urban renewal. I know, there's a SMID along Southwest 9th, which is an additional funding stream for that corridor. That is, not super related to TIF, but it allows for additional funding for the improvements along Southwest 9th. I don't know the history with the Southwest 9th potential for urban renewal.
Just from a planning perspective, there was some planning exercises that were done that Schmid district came out of, and most of the revenue from that Schmid district, I believe, is going towards marketing for the corridor in partnership with the Friends of Southwest 9th organization. And I think there's been some talk about a couple pocket locations of doing some improvements.
And just as a quick follow-up to Will's question, we do have an urban renewal area that extends to the north along Northeast 14th. It is not one of our more active urban renewal areas, but it is in place for potential development.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, and it's really quite helpful. My question is to expand it to the south.
Along, you mean south of the boundary here?
The existing boundary, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So when we do these proactive urban renewal areas, how do we let people know that might invest in these areas that is active and present?
There has been a little bit of coverage on this urban renewal area. I know that 2 media stations reached out for just a small spot for these urban renewal areas, but I think we can and will, actively promote this opportunity to our development community and respond to any inquiries that we have with the opportunity of urban renewal.
Thank you so much, Katie. We'll move on to the meeting. And I think there are people outside who think, yeah, we'll wait for them.
It did seem odd to have nobody.
Yeah, yeah. Which one are you on? Just so we, because it might be taken off. Oh, it's on it. It's on consent. Oh, it's on consent. Okay. Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay. All right, sorry we're starting a little late. We had a special presentation. Welcome to the October 20th, 2022 meeting of the City of Des Moines Plan and Zoning Commission. I will start by reading the rules and procedures. The Plan and Zoning Commission is generally an advisory body to the City Council. The City Council will hold a public hearing and make a final decision on all matters before the Commission other than site plans and subdivision plats, unless denials or conditional approvals thereof are appealed. Please contact the City Clerk or Development Services Department staff for details on council hearings. Applicant will be given 10 minutes to present the request. Proponents and then opponents from the public are then allowed to speak in that order, with each speaker allowed a maximum of 5 minutes. Applicant is then allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal. The hearing will then be closed and the Commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the item under consideration and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report unless an individual present or member of the Commission requests that the item be removed from consent and considered separately under the public hearing agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 6, 2022 meeting? Thank you, Abby. Abby has moved.
Sorry. Could have spoken that.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And are Dory and Justin on the line?
I vote yes. This is Dory.
Thank you, Dory. Justin, are you on? All right. I will start with the consent agenda items. I want to start with item 8 has actually been withdrawn. So if you're here for item 8, we are not discussing that tonight. I'm just letting you know in advance. Item number 1, determination as to whether the proposed Southeast 14th Street Urban Renewal Plan is in conformance with Plan DSM. Does anyone on the Commission want to discuss this item tonight? Anyone in the public? That will remain on consent. Number 2, request from Liberty Holdings, owner 1626 Dixon Street, represented by Jeff Tucker, regarding the vacation of 150 long segment of Dixon Court right-of-way located north of East Washington Ave. Does anyone on the Commission wish to hear this item? Anyone in the public? Remain on consent. Number 3, request from Electrical Workers Foundation, represented by Patrick Wells, for property at 850 18th Street. A, determination as to whether the requested rezoning is in conformance with Plan DSM, and B, rezone property from RX1 mixed use to NX2A neighborhood mixed use to RX1 mixed use district to allow for existing building for medical office. Anyone on the Commission wish to hear this item? Anyone in the public? Number 3 will remain on consent. Number 4, request from ILAX Group, represented by Ben Schultes, for 2 parcels located in 4600 East 14th. A, determination as to whether requested rezoning is in Plan DSM, creating our tomorrow plan, amend Plan DSM to assign industrial within a community node, future land use. C, rezone the property from A, agricultural district to I-1 industrial to allow industrial use in coordination with property adjacent to the west. Anyone on the commission wish to hear this item? Anyone in the public? Number 5, request from Barbara R. Smith, represented by Ben Johnson, for review and approval of public hearing site plan for type 2 design alternatives for property at 3902 Southeast Court to allow construction of a 576 square foot detached garage in the rear yard that would be within 2 feet of the north side property line where a 5-foot minimum setback is required. Anyone on the commission want to hear this item? Anyone in the public? Number 5 will be heard on public hearing.
I just want, are you opposed to the item? Are you the applicant? Okay, so if we leave it on consent, we won't have to do a presentation, it'll get approved. Are you, I assume you're okay with that? Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay, so we'll keep it on consent for you. That's a better thing for you. Number 6, request from Larson Enterprises, represented by John Fitzgerald, for review and approval of a public hearing site plan, Champion Express Car Wash, for property at 2565 East Euclid Ave, for design alternatives A through C. Is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item? Anyone in the public? There is,
Can I clear, was this the one on last week, or last time that got moved? Or is this a different one? Oh,
No, Madam Chair, members of the commission, Bert Ross, planning staff for the city of Des Moines, no, it's the same car wash company, but that is actually item number 7 on the agenda, which is about 1.5 miles west on East Euclid Avenue.
That's why I was confused, sorry.
Yes, yep.
and speaking of that item has been requested to have a continuance until November 17th. Request from Eastgate Plaza, represented by Norman Weinstein, for review and approval of an 8th Amendment to Eastgate Plaza PUD for property at 1514 East Euclid Ave to allow car wash use.
Yeah, and that one, if you remember last month, staff had recommended denial of that PUD amendment. They're still trying to come up with some creative ways to improve it so that staff could possibly be supportive. So they have requested a continuance again to November 17th to try to
We're
make some
actually
of those
meeting
changes.
with them tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'd appreciate, I think it's worth giving them more time.
So do we have a motion to continue that item until November 17th?
I'll move.
Thank you. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Dory, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. And Justin, are you on? All right. That moves. Number 9 has been requested to move to consent. Request from City of Des Moines and Board of Waterworks Trustees, represented by Ted Corrigan, for the following regarding 6 parcels located in the vicinity of 2508 George Flagg Parkway. Determination as to whether requested rezoning is in Plan DSM, amend Plan DSM to revise future land use, designation from business park to industrial, rezone the property from EX mixed use district to I1 industrial to allow an office and garage building as well as outdoor storage.
And I can give a brief explanation on that one if you'd like. This is the Des Moines Waterworks wants to build a new maintenance facility. The only reason they need to rezone is they need some outdoor storage at the back of the site. So we've recommended some pretty strict conditions, just saying that the permitted uses are still EX plus the outdoor storage accessory to an EX use. So we feel the conditions that we've recommended are strict, and the applicant has agreed to them. So we're comfortable moving it to consent.
All right. Is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item?
I would like to abstain from voting on anything regarding waterworks.
Thank you. Anyone in the public? All right. Number 9 will remain on consent, or will be moved to consent. Oh, sorry.
So
We need a
can-
motion. I'm getting
can-
ahead of myself.
So I moved to motion it to consent, is that right?
Right.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Oh, Chris, are you making that motion?
Yes, please, I would like to move it to consent, please.
Thank you, Chris. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And Dory, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Justin, are you on? And Katie Gillette abstains. Okay, so for consent, we have 1 through 6, and then we have 9. Do I have a motion to move consent?
I'll move.
Thanks, Todd. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And Dory, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think you were abstaining, you'd mentioned you were abstaining on one item.
I'm abstaining from item 3.
And then Katie probably abstained again from item 9, just for the record.
Thank you, Jason. That's very helpful. So our public hearing items are 10 and 11, and we'll start with number 10. It's a request from Sheldon Ronnie for the following property at 1626 East Park Ave. Determination as to whether requested rezoning is in conformance with Plan DSM, amendment to Plan DSM, land use from low-density residential to community mixed use, rezone from N3A neighborhood to MX3 to allow use of property for vehicle sales service. And Frank will be presenting.
Do you want to open that and, do we have that on the,
Oh,
on
yeah.
this computer? I mean, we have a new computer up here, so I,
Yeah, let me try and reopen that. Open that with,
yeah, there you go.
Justin said he's trying to call in and the number's not working. Yeah. I'll just tell him not to worry about it.
okay. Good evening, Chair, members of the commission. My name is Frank Dunn, site plan review staff. I'm here to present item 10A through 10C. Request from Sheldon Roney for the following regarding property located at 1626 East Park Avenue. The first request is a determination as to whether the requested rezoning is in conformance with Plan DSM, creating our tomorrow comprehensive plan. B, amendment to the Plan DSM, creating our tomorrow plan future land use classification from low-density residential to community mixed use, and rezone property from N3A neighborhood district to MX3 use district to allow the use of the property for vehicle sales and service, vehicle maintenance, repair, minor use. And so I'd like to go ahead and open this up, see if I can zoom in on this just a touch to make it a little larger. And so here's the context of the property that we're looking at in question. As you can see, it's on the north side of East Park Avenue. It is west of Southeast 17th Street. And here are a couple photos of the property. This is actually facing north along the property. Another image facing more northwest from the corner. Right there's the sign, Southeast 17th Street. So it's right up at the edge of Park Avenue, Southeast 17th, where this is taken. And then here's a photo along the frontage of the property facing west. And so there a little history with this item that's in front of us today. In 2018, the applicant came in for what we call a special permit under the old zoning code. At that time, they received approval for the special use permit to allow construction of the facility that was shown in the pictures. This is more of a diagram of the size of that garage. It's approximately 1,536 square feet. And here's the front view. But in the previous photo, you could kind of see back in the distance. Let me scroll down. That's not the one. You could see the garage back in the distance, and I need to grab this. It's back here. So they were allowed to operate until August of 2021. At such time, they were to either cease use as an auto repair business at that location, or they were to come back for an additional special use permit request in front of Board of Adjustment. However, as you all know, in 2019, we updated and we updated our code to the new Plan DSM, and that option to go to Board of Adjustment for special use permit is no longer there. That requires them to first come to us to rezone the property. Should they fail to rezone the property, they could seek a use variance in front of the Board of Adjustment. And so a little more context about the property. It is about an acre and a half. It's approximately 1.47 acres. It's a very large parcel. The property sets back, the garages do set back a distance. However, the property is zoned N3A neighborhood district for the setting and for the use that's being proposed to rezone it to MX3. Staff do not believe that this would be the appropriate location. MX3 are considered more of our high-density corridors, and so staff does not feel as though that this would be the appropriate place to rezone the property as it sits entirely within the neighborhood. Here are some photos. There is support on behalf of the neighbors. They did write in. A couple neighbors did comment. They are in support of it. However, we did receive a correspondence from the Neighborhood Association president. Here is that comment. They are supportive of the business as it exists there today. However, rezoning it to MX3 is not what they don't believe that it would be the appropriate location for that, knowing that the applicant would have the opportunity within a year to seek a use variance in front of the Board of Adjustment. And so for that reason, staff is recommending denial of the requested rezoning to be found in conformance with plans, existing Plan DSM future land use designation for low-density residential. Staff recommends denial of the request to amend the Plan DSM plan from low-density residential to community mixed. And staff recommends denial of the proposed rezoning from N3A neighborhood district to MX3 mixed use district. What questions do you have for staff?
All right, well, if there are no questions, Thank you, Frank. Is the applicant present? Please come up. You have 10 minutes. State your name, address, and sign in when you're finished.
Hello, everybody. So my name's Sheldon Roney, 1626 East Park Avenue. Like Frank said, I went through the process with the Zoning Board of Appeals. They approved me to do at-home auto repair. In their actual statements that they made, that I was eligible to come back for a checkup to make sure everything was good and nothing turned into a junkyard. After COVID, all that was done, everybody got back in the offices. I went to the online portal and there's no option available. So now I'm here applying for the rezone. I'm not really for it. I think, as everybody else recommends, or, you know, the neighborhood association recommends just leaving it as is. I don't really have anything else on that. Any questions?
So you're against the rezoning?
I just want the ability to go back to the zoning board and ask from, you know, to continue doing what I've been doing.
We've had this come up before, that you can't seek a use variance until you've been denied rezoning.
Correct.
And just to clarify, under the previous code, auto repair was eligible as a home occupation use, which it is not. We still have home occupations, but it's just not one that we have in our code. And certainly, given the investment that's been made at the property, I think the applicant has hardship, you know, that he can demonstrate to the board. But certainly from a long view perspective, as we've discussed, amending the land use plan, rezoning the property just doesn't make sense from that perspective.
Correct.
All right, well, I'm glad you're aware. It sounds like you're well-versed, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you sign in here then?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone want to speak in favor of this item?
Well, I guess I don't know whether it's in favor. I don't understand the
If you want to speak, you just have to come up. You can come up, we'll say it's neutral.
There you go.
Just state your name and address and then sign in when you're done.
All right, my name is Kelly Mills. I live at 1610 East Park Avenue. I am the neighbor of Sheldon, just to the west, so our entire property line is together. My house is the closest to him, lived there 14 years. He's never had an issue. My issue is I don't want a commercial property in such a residential. We already have so many issues on 14th and Park that if, say that becomes a commercial property, my main concern is he moves, what does it become next? We already have those problems. Let him do what he wants to do. That's pretty much what I have to say. So I don't see why something that he would have to move that to a commercial property when he's so far back from the street line anyway. If you didn't know that there was a repair shop there, you wouldn't know it existed. So that's where I am.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And it sounds like he knows the process, what he has to do.
Oh yeah, he's got it.
All right, is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak on this item? Any commissioners have questions?
I have one quick one. If he goes to the zoning board of adjustment and gets the variance, how long is that valid?
It would be valid as long as he continues to operate, unless the board would choose to put some sort of time frame on it based off of some rationale, like maybe for the life of the building kind of thing. Because I think the case he should be making is the physical investment on the property. And so I think you could tie that relief to the life of the building.
I've got a procedural question for staff, because we have seen a lot of these, well, maybe not a lot, a handful of these come through the board, through the commission, that are aware that they have to go through the board after rejection, and they're in favor of that. Is there a way for us to just put them on consent, or do we have to hear the item?
Well, I think I think we could ask the applicant if we have a sense that they're understanding and favorable. I think in the future we could ask the applicant. I don't know that we always know until we get here and they kind of see the writing, but we certainly will keep that in mind.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. And I'll move staff.
Thank you.
All in favor, please raise your right hand. And Dory, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, Justin, are you there? Did you resend him the? He's not there. All right. Thank you.
Motion carried 12-0.
Number 11, a request from Larry Cool for review and approval of a public hearing site plan, Donna's Garage parking lot for property at 4424 Southeast 14th, and for design alternatives A and B. And Nick Tarpey will be presenting.
Thanks. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Nick Tarpey, planning staff. I want to give a kind of a quick overview of maybe what we're going to be looking at tonight. So there's a couple of design alternatives. We were looking at a site plan for some new development. Just a quick background on how this came to be, the purview of staff on this. So this time, about a year ago, staff did receive basically a notice from our zoning enforcement department that there was site improvements that took place at this property. There was an existing parking lot that was paved over and expanded without the applicable permits, so permits for working in the right-of-way, a building permit for the new paving, and a site plan for the site improvements. So there is an active code case on the property, so that was referred to planning staff. Our zoning enforcement staff also discussed with the applicant their next steps, so they referred them to a pre-application meeting where they could meet with somebody like myself on planning staff and other members of city staff to talk about, okay, we got to do a site plan, what do you need to do, what all goes into that, what are the logistics of that, and so that was communicated to the applicant about this time a year ago. The applicant then went out, hired a designer to create a site plan. That was submitted to us, and we've been kind of going back and forth basically over the summer into the fall, and then now we're here tonight because there's certain elements of the site plan that the applicant would like to waive that staff is not necessarily in support of, so we can talk about that tonight. But that's a synopsis basically of how we got here, and we can explain that a little bit more if you have further questions. So the two design alternatives tonight, they kind of relate. One of them has to do with drive access, and the other one has to do with certain paving setbacks and parking lot buffers, so I'll describe both of those. So thinking about this site here, outlined in the orange, so this is Donna's Garage. It is a well-known establishment on Southeast 14th, so we're staying on the corridor tonight. It's about a quarter mile south of Watrous, about a quarter mile north of McKinley, so about smack dab in the middle of that, if you're trying to think about where it is positionally on the south side. And also just want to note too, this is the previous condition of the site, so this is how it was, and then here are some photos from earlier this week, so you can see that it was paved over and it was expanded a little bit. So this is a view from the corner, so Southeast 14th and Emma Avenue, which is the cross street. Here's another view from that corner looking up. This is looking north. And I'll probably come back to these pictures and refer to them again. And then here's just a view from across the street. So just digging into the site plan, what was submitted here, here's a survey, basically existing conditions that was completed by the designer. So you can see there's basically a paved extent all over. Demo plan showing some of the work that's proposed of the pavement removal. And then here's the proposed landscaping plan. So digging into the staff report here, there's two main design alternatives. The first one has to do with the access drives. So within the zoning ordinance, there's basically a hierarchy of access drives that all sites are permitted to have. And really the point of that is to try to dilute traffic flow and vehicle in, vehicle out from primary streets that have a lot more activity, vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic, other type of multimodal traffic, and try to funnel that to either alleys or non-primary streets. And so this site, it's got 3 existing drive accesses. With the site plan, what the code would require was that they would remove the 2 drive accesses on Southeast 14th Street, which is considered a primary street, and just utilize the Emma Avenue entrance as their main vehicular access. As staff's position, we feel that there's 3 existing accesses here for one site, and really it's a single-use site. Really, it's really only appropriate for them to have one access. There's not really a demonstrated traffic need for them to have 3 drive accesses into and out of the site. The other thing that I did want to mention too is that we did receive some correspondence from our traffic and transportation staff that generally, in addition to this being a code requirement, and this is what we want them to do to comply with the zoning ordinance, generally reducing drive access is something that really increases safety along corridors. So we talked a lot about Southeast 14th Street tonight. Commissioner Page did bring up that there's a lot of safety concerns in terms of vehicular crashes and things like that. Our traffic and transportation staff did corroborate a lot of that. It's a really high volume corridor. There's a lot of cars going in and out every day. And so removing those 2 drive accesses is something that would really improve both vehicular as well as pedestrian safety in the corridor, because data have shown that the more drive accesses that you have on a road in terms of access density, it does increase crashes. There's shown to be a correlation with that. And so as staff, we're doing a site plan. There's really no other way for us to remove private drives without site development. And so as staff, our position would be those drives should be removed and the traditional curb and gutter configuration restored through there. And again, that's really for vehicular as well as pedestrian safety, to try to reduce some of those conflicts that can happen on those low visibility and really high speed corridors like a Southeast 14th. The other design alternative the applicant is requesting tonight is for some of the parking lot buffering. So as this group is probably pretty familiar with, whenever there's a parking lot in the city, there is required to be what's called a fence frontage buffer. So that's a 7-foot paving setbacks. It's a 7-foot green area that would basically wrap the parking lot facing any public streets or public ways. And then that would include an ornamental fence, some shrubs, grasses, and then some trees as well. What the applicant is proposing is they're proposing to waive the provision of trees. As staff, we do not support this request because for a lot of reasons. It's not just necessarily for aesthetics or beautification, even though those are nice goals of tree provision. Another one of those goals is to provide shade, especially on these urban thoroughfares that don't have a lot of shade on the sidewalks. There's a dart stop at the site. And so generally, as our staff position is, we have these existing sidewalks here, these existing pedestrian corridors that don't have a lot of shade. And so providing trees would add to that. In addition to providing trees for shade for pedestrians, we'd also provide shade for the parking lot. It's a pretty large expanse of paved area, contributes to urban heat island effect, and so adding a few trees would reduce that. And then also, this, as noted previously, the site's pretty highly impervious, so adding a few trees would enhance the stormwater management potential of the site. Another thing that I do want to note when we're talking about landscaping here is that we have gone back and forth with the applicant as staff, and we've tried to be pretty flexible. We understand that this is kind of a difficult situation. Being there an active code case, there is zoning enforcement on the property, so we've tried to be pretty flexible with them in terms of the provision of their landscaping. We have granted some waivers in terms of some of the other requirements, like the buffering that would be required to the west, some of the interior parking lot landscaping, so like row islands or shading, the fence frontage buffer on the south side of the property facing Emma Avenue. So we've tried to maintain a degree of flexibility here. One of the things that staff we really do want to stand on, though, is that the fence frontage buffer, particularly along Southeast 14th Street, we really are in support of closing those access drives and adding those trees along there, both for the site but also for the public way that abuts right against it. So for those multiple reasons, staff does not support the requested design alternatives. And also, I wanted to highlight, I did say that we got some correspondence from our traffic and transportation staff. I'm going to let this linger for a second here. This is the response that they provided to us when they found out that this item was going to Plan and Zoning Commission. So I'll let this sit here. This group can read that. So this is the notification boundary. We did not receive any formal or informal comments at all. And I'll be happy to take any questions at that time. That concludes my presentation.
Was the relief that was granted, were those type 1?
Yeah, those are type 1. So how the code reads, anything in the landscaping section of Chapter 135 Planning and Design Ordinance, Article 7, those are automatically, at least initially, considered as type 1 design alternatives. Staff can choose to make them type 2s. basically. But staff kind of felt it was appropriate at this site, given the context, we could approve some of those type 1 design alternatives for some of the landscaping.
The 32,000 vehicle trips, which is obviously an interestingly clean number, is that based on pneumatic strips, on video analysis? Is it IT calculation? And if that's a whole day, what's hourly peak?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that answer. This was just forwarded in an email to me from Corey Bogenreef, who's one of our senior traffic engineers. I think that they get that just kind of as a general number from the DOT, them communicating with our traffic staff. I don't know if we have an hourly figure with that.
Does someone on the phone have a question? All right, thank you, Nick. Is the applicant present? I think you know the drill.
Hopefully. Good evening, Honorable Chair, members of the Commission. Wally Peltz, Peltz Design Services, 2323 Dixon Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50316. Representing Donna's Garage on this project, and Nick's done a great job. It's been great to work with him. I think we're to 2 impasses that our clients are asking for. They made the mistake of actually paving a gravel driveway. If you'd been to Donna's Garage before, it had deteriorated from HMA and it turned to gravel and had been that way for quite a while. A couple of things that we wanted to discuss on this. I did print out, and I can leave this for the record, that's the last, do I need to turn this on?
Yeah, I think we're getting it. It's there.
Okay. You can see the dots. So the lower rectangle on the left-hand side is Donna's Garage. You can see the 2 entrances. Then you see all the dots that are here on the page. And that represents, if you can see, over 10 years, there's been 9 accidents, 24 occupants, 17 vehicles, 2 minor, and 1 personal injury, I believe is what that says. And that's over a 10-year span. So that's from the ICAT system that the DOT provided us, because we asked them to, or they directed us to their website. The second portion I wanted to bring up is, this one's a little bit bigger. This is the original strip map when Southeast 14th got expanded. If you'll notice, I did kind of blow it up so you can see it. Used to be called Ray Mercer's Lounge when they did this project. And there were 2 Type B entrances granted and paved as a part of this project, which at that point the DOT didn't seem to think that this was an issue. We contacted the DOT, and I know it's a joint strip between the DOT and the City of Des Moines. They said they've issued 2 Type B entrance permits. They see no reason to take them away, especially when we looked at the number of accidents that have happened in this place. It's 10 in 10 years, so 1 per year, no fatalities. So at that point, you can consider it a somewhat safe intersection. Most people feel safe driving on Southeast 14th, even with 32,000 vehicles per day. If you looked at a peak hour on that, you will find in a peak hour you're hitting close to 3,000 to 4,000 vehicles in each lane in each direction during the peak rushes. So our request from our client is that if we're asked to go to the southern entrance, we have delivery trucks that come. It is a drinking establishment, so you get your Budweiser, your light beer trucks. The delivery, the beverage delivery, whether it be Dahl or whoever, that services, you're going to push them onto Emma, and then I have problems once I get into my site for maneuverability, for turning around. So if there's cars there, I'll be backing out onto Emma Street, which I know the traffic department hates. I've had the discussions with Mr. Garrett about this on other projects. So we're asking to keep both of them because they were originally permitted as a Type B access by the DOT. On the trees, for our client, again, I hope you understand their point of view. They thought they were doing something good by taking a gravel parking lot and paving it. They unfortunately listened to their contractor, who said they didn't need a permit because they're just paving an existing gravel parking lot. To their surprise, they got a notice from the zoning commission, and we've been trying to resolve it ever since. So, I guess the one option was, I think you can take all the improvements out and restore it to what it was, and then it's not a violation. But I think we've gone down far enough down the road where everyone wants to move forward. They like the asphalt. They don't like being on the gravel. And then I wanted to show a couple of things that we're going to have to do already. So the items that you see in red are the areas where we're removing paving and leaving the two DOT entrances. So we are proposing to put landscaping here with the grasses and that ornamental fence, similar to what you see at Fazoli's. I think we can potentially put a tree or two in there if it'll fit in that 7-foot area. They prefer just to do the taller grasses for the visibility because, they're a business and most of 14th has pretty good visibility from it. So, and these are areas that they're going to be cutting out brand new asphalt. However, I think we're going through the steps. One of the other things is, so this site is tight in general. I've got grade issues in the parking lot where I'm at 7 to 8% grade, which is not an ADA route compatible. So we were looking at where the entrance is, where's the place where I can put an ADA spot, and that's to the north. We will be having to take that asphalt out as well because it does not comply with the less than 2% grade, which then allows for easier entrance. If we close this one, it makes it more difficult for them to back out. If we lose this one, the trucks usually pull in here is what I'm told for their delivery. And they make a circular motion and pull back out. So with that, I think I've bored you enough. If you would have any questions for us, I thought they were going to be here, so I apologize. If you had any questions for me, happy to answer any technical questions.
On that old drawing, what is a type B parking, or whatever that was, that curb cut on that
A type B entrance is a commercial entrance. Type A would be residential. Type C is a very high volume or a street access, is what the DOT classifies them at.
What type of trucks are actually going in? Like, what is the actual traffic that's being used here?
I believe they have a shorter tractor trailer coming in. It's not a straight truck.
You referenced a 4,000 peak. Where did you get that number?
That would be based off the trip generation. So there's a trip generation manual that we all use. I don't have any specific counts. That would just be the ratio that you'd apply to that type of daily traffic.
Okay, so you used ITE to get the 4,000 as
Yep.
your estimate for what's around you, which is...
In that peak hour. And it's 4,000 coming south, and it's about 4,000 going north.
Yep, yeah, okay.
And it's, the other thing I did want to reiterate, these are right-in, right-out entrances only. They do not have any access to go across the street. Yes, sir.
In your drawing that you showed, were you proposing to remove or retain the entrance on Emma?
We're proposing to retain that. But we have to we show it being torn out because we have to make the sidewalk connection. So to make that a proper sidewalk connection, I got to tear some of my new asphalt out anyway. So we're trying to minimize that as much as we can. So we're taking the sidewalk to the west. Trying to remember if we're redoing that sidewalk along 14th. Nope, that's an existing sidewalk. But we are creating more of a grassy area, taking 7 feet between the entrances and to the north to create that buffer. And I think our clients mentioned that they saw what they did down at Fazoli's, and I don't know if Fazoli's has trees or not. I think they're just ornamental grasses and that iron fence. So I think we're complying with everything. We're just asking for, I think they made a mistake.
I have a question.
Sure.
If this was new development, would any or both of the entrances meet the SUDA's requirements?
That would be a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I know that in the zoning ordinance, it talks about when you do new development in that, what is it? It's not condos, but it's community. It's in 135.2.6.3 at the top of the table. It calls it a specific type of area.
You talking about the future land use map designation, community mixed use, and it's in a node?
Yeah, it's a certain type of node where they say if you do this type of a building, that's the reference in the site plan that they're talking about is a new development. Where it would push the access off of the primary drive and off to the side drive. So if we were doing this today, I don't know that it would be SUDAS that would push us there, but it would most likely be the zoning ordinance that would push us.
Yeah, chapter 1, I mean, that's the whole, we're applying today's standard, and that's what you and your client are asking for relief of, which for this building type in this zoning district, driveways are supposed to come off a secondary road, and so you're asking for relief of it, where as staff had recommended not do that, so that's where that standard is coming from.
Right, so in SUDAS, I didn't investigate whether SUDAS would make me do that or not.
Would SUDAS impact size or turn radius or location, proximity to Emma or anything like that?
It would do all of those things. I mean, I think we're coming forward to you with a grandfather type clause. I mean, it was an existing business. Had they not paved their parking lot, I wouldn't be talking to you, which I think is actually a really good thing that they paved their parking lot. We have enough gravel drives and parking lots, at least in our neighborhood, that I'd like to see paved. But they thought they were doing something good to improve it. We're told by a contractor they didn't have to get permits, and now they find themselves in a zoning violation. And so we're trying to make the best of a situation that we have.
All right. Any other questions? Thanks, Wally.
Thank you.
I don't think we have anyone left to support or not support your item. Any questions for staff?
I have a comment, maybe it's more of a question. Can somebody on staff or zoning describe to me the logic and what the benefit of a fence is in this installation?
I think it's, in this particular installation, it's just a part of the visual screen. I mean, it'd be part of the softening views, so it's kind of intertwined with plant material. It's just another visual obstacle. I think maybe where you're heading, we've used the fence in a more urban setting where it's supposed to try to represent a building wall. I recognize in this particular case with the building setback and just the context of the area that really this fence is achieving more of a kind of a visual screen of the parking.
Thanks. In this installation or this case, in this corridor that we talked about earlier, trees are more valuable than the cute little fence, in my opinion. And they'll certainly outlast a fence. So I'd rather see trees than fence in this particular instance.
And I think I understood the fence. I think the applicant's concern is primarily the perception of people not being able to see their building if they have trees. Is that accurate? Is money part of it? Because a tree is not in of itself terribly expensive. At least they weren't at one time. I haven't looked at one for a while, but.
Is the statement was made that if they just tore it back out to gravel, we'd have no more problem. Is that accurate, or is this in a position where if they did tear it all out, we'd still have a problem?
I can't speak for what our enforcement staff has told the applicant. I don't want to, it seems like there might be more to the story than just the fact of the driveway. I think they repaved the whole thing. So so tearing it out, I think it's not just the drive approach. It's not really practical I don't think they're going to take out the whole parking lot. So I think that's just kind of a side anecdotal part of the fact that they felt like they were being okay and didn't realize what they were doing.
Yeah, I'm just curious about our logic. So right now, the whole parking lot is paved. It was gravel before. If they tore it out and turned it to gravel, would we be happy with that?
No, but I don't know I don't think that's a realistic option, or that's really part of the dialogue. I just think that I don't want to speak for the enforcement staff as to whether that's even a viable option, because they've altered the property, like from a zoning perspective. Once you make the alteration, this is a site plan consideration, so, but usually if you impact a use of a property from just kind of general zoning perspective, that change has already occurred. So we can't really walk back the change. You can tear it out, but that's just another change. But I don't want to speak without being in the middle of those conversations of what our enforcement staff have told them and what's accurate, what the zoning enforcement officer has actually determined. I think we're just kind of speculating. I think just for tonight's purposes, we just need to keep the fact that they're before us. They've made a change to the property, and we've got two design alternatives to look at.
I think the point made about the truck traffic, the delivery truck traffic, is interesting. Is staff at all concerned about forcing all delivery truck traffic onto the Emma Street entrance?
No. So our traffic and transportation staff, when they consider funneling traffic kind of through one entrance, they consider all types of traffic. That was not a concern that was raised during the review.
All right. If there are no other questions for Nick, I'll close the public hearing. And what are your thoughts?
I guess not to be broken record, but on the traffic piece, right? If ITE even has a peak at 4,000, MUTCD doesn't really seem to have concerns until we hit 6,000, and we're showing that we don't have the 5 accidents in the last 6 months that would actually precipitate concern as this being a dangerous area. I don't see evidence that we've provided that's based off of actual observation, because IT is not they aren't great tools, but I don't see evidence that we've collected of real world that indicates this is more dangerous, or dangerous enough to warrant pulling these out, especially if you're getting primarily use of trucks trying to back up a truck into this. That, we deal in trucks. That's sort of hard. It's something that I think that we'd want to, not make it harder onto a side road. That seems more dangerous.
Chris, do you think that you need both of those curb cuts off of 14th for truck traffic, if that's a engineering concern?
Personally, I'm of the logic that yes, if your issue is circulation for truck deliveries in, it would seem logical to me that being able to take away one would make some sense. I guess I'm not the engineer on this. This is a professional engineer, so I default to their logic on why 2 would be needed, especially other considerations. But I don't think we should be taking away driveways on the argument of safety when there isn't an indication it's there, is my bigger point. So whether there's 1 or 2, I would be amenable to just having 1, but I don't see it being appropriate for us to remove two if the argument is safety when we haven't made a strong safety argument?
Just to be a little contrary here, I think, as we've heard earlier this evening, there is a goal to create Southeast 14th more multimodal and more friendly for pedestrians, more safe for pedestrians, and I would argue that these two curb cuts definitely go against that. I know it's not a heavily used pedestrian corridor, but there is a bus stop on the corner. And from a pedestrian standpoint, I think walking down that when the traffic is behind you and you don't know if it's going to turn, that's a lot of constant looking over your shoulder. There's a perception of it not being safe and therefore making pedestrians not want to walk that corridor. So I guess I understand what you're saying about the truck traffic, and I realize that this is a very auto-oriented area, but looking at the overarching goals of having other forms of transportation like pedestrians and bikes, this would go against that.
Not to be too pedantic in my answer, Andy, I don't think we should pull them away because of safety, but I do agree with Abby that only one would be my preference in a personal perspective.
I think I would go along with the one. I travel this corridor a lot, and frankly, I'm not convinced that statistics that have been given about the number of accidents, which have been, this is historical information, is actually true today. We all know if you drive around the city of Des Moines, anytime you drive around, you've seen somebody in an accident, right? So statistics from years past don't resonate with me, quite frankly, because there's increased traffic and people are driving a lot faster. A stop sign is meaningless, and a red light means to slow down. At least that's what I've found. I mean, I'd go along with the one entrance, but I also think that the landscaping is an important factor as well, because not only does it act as a buffer for, it's an aesthetic factor, and it certainly, Southeast 14th can benefit by aesthetic appeal. So I would be not in favor of reducing what's been proposed by staff along that line.
Just to follow up on that, I don't know what the value is of the northernmost entrance, seeing that you're almost driving straight into the building. You've got two parking spaces that could be moved south, more added green space where those parking spaces are now. So I support staff in that. The southernmost one seems to be the one the trucks are accessing. So.
If this were a new building or a new project that was coming through, though, they'd basically be required to use the Avenue Drive. I mean, the same, you know what I mean? Like a new, I'm not really asking a question, I'm just saying that's the case. I mean, if it wasn't an existing situation, and the trucks would need to figure it out, and that's kind of the case, so I don't know. I just want to throw out there that it's also not that big of a deal to just go with the plan, and that's how the rest of the corridor will be developed, as we're incentivizing with this urban renewal district that's probably going through now. A new redevelopment of a site would go that way. So I know the argument is it's hard to turn around trucks and things, but that's what happens.
We also wouldn't have the building in this location, though, if it's a new one, right?
True.
Is there a motion from anyone?
I would move staff except to give relief for the southern of the two accesses on Southeast 14th Street.
Thanks, Will. I'm supportive of that as well. All in favor of Will's motion, please raise your right hand. And Dory, how do you vote?
I agree.
Thank you. And Justin, are you on? All right.
Yes, I'm here. I agree as well.
Oh, great. Thanks for joining. Welcome. And any opposed, please raise your right hand. Is that everyone?
Yes, yep. Motion carries 11-2.
All right, thanks everyone for the lively discussion. Jason's going to show us a schedule.
Yeah, every year we put out a schedule for the next year, try to keep us on track so the public knows what we're doing. So hopefully we've done an okay job. It follows the same pattern, first and third Thursdays. We have a couple meetings in there that we've, actually I think we just have the one in January, that first meeting that we are looking to not hold due to the conflict with the holidays. So if there's no questions or concerns by anything, we'd like to have a motion for approval.
Thanks, Todd. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And Dory and Justin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. And I'd just like to note that I talked to Jason. We do have quite a few new people in the last year. So we're going to try to do a training for the commissioners just on like what everything means, what goes on consent, why does it go on consent, things like that. We don't think we're going to be able to fit it in this year. Early next year, probably not the January meeting because it's a pretty packed meeting generally.
Yeah.
We only have one meeting that month. So maybe a February meeting if possible, if it's a lighter agenda. So just look out for that.
Yeah, this is Justin. I agree, and I think that's a great idea.
Thanks, Justin.
I will be
Yeah.
partaking.
Justin?
I think he said it was a good idea.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, we have committee and directors report. So there was a document sent out by Chris, and I can kind of just let him talk, but if anyone had questions on it, this would be the time.
I did not speak to you all in a public meeting format, but I did talk to a number of you individually about this and try and gather some questions to start, and I thought to try and get ahead of the first few of them, I want to lay out a little bit of, again, what is this, why is this, and I guess what are we hoping, what is the strategy committee hoping to achieve? So when you're looking at one of the questions that someone has, like what is our actual job? When we look at our actual job, which is published on the website, basically identifies that the Plan and Zoning Commission oversees the preparation and administration of the comprehensive plan, which is the Plan DSM, Creating Our Tomorrow, zoning, long-range planning, site planning, land subdivisions, and public improvements as defined by codes, sets policy, and determines plan and zoning requirements. Within that remit, where this sort of came from was, number one, we often get edge cases like the restaurant in Ingersoll 2 weeks ago, or, again, this 14th Street urban renewal plan, or even the question on fences from Todd tonight. Many of us struggle with how accommodations are appropriate. In order to understand how these edge cases should be thought of in the context of Plan DSM, we need to understand how the city is strategically looking at these edge cases. And I would argue that we really can't do the job as defined on the website, which again includes overseeing preparation of Plan DSM, sets policies, and determines plans and requirements, if we aren't on the same strategic page. So I would argue we really need to know what strategies are being pursued. This particular document came about because I had questions on how we were strategically viewing TIF and the urban rural districts, sort of almost ironically, now timing-wise. I was told in basically a 90-plus minute meeting that we had no strategy, nor time to develop one, which I don't believe is possible. So instead, I hypothesized that our strategies could be identified if we made an effort to find a logical linkage between the projects and goals and objectives directly taken from Plan DSM. And I took this first cut. of what I saw to be the logical, strategic consistencies between the projects and goals that are identified by Plan DSM and approved by the City Council. So what I'm hoping this can do in there is some may have asked, the strategies I've written out, these are me trying to look and say, okay, here's our plans, here's our goals, how do they connect to each other? What is the strategy allows for this plan to be appropriate for this goal? And, I am personally in disagreement with some of them, but I think that this was my best attempt to reflect what I think is occurring. My hope from this is that if everyone looks in and says, oh man, if this is actually what we're doing, maybe we should rethink a few items, we should actually go out and continue the discussion and improve upon it in some way and make sure it's better. Ideally, I'm not sure we should outsource that to Florida. I think we should do that locally and figure out what strategies we're going to pursue in making our community better for all of us with respect to what our role is with plan and zoning and ordinance development. Possibly someone takes a look and says, well, these sort of make some sense, but we're going to actually just, fix a few things that are small. I still think that's a big win. That's, if we can do anything like undergrounding was something we're looking at every single week. We have a better policy now. We've removed those things. The recommendation tonight that says, hey, why don't we move these to consent where we have that weird sort of state and local interaction. 2 meetings ago, we had a level of contention there that arrived at extra visitors places they shouldn't be, and we should probably try to avoid those items, especially if they are circular like that and staff is doing the right thing anyway. Those are things that maybe that's a possible thing we can highlight with this type of a document to say we should approach these differently. Worst case, we push this forward, no one cares, and it dies. Okay, fine. But as plan and zoning goes, we can say, hey, this is what we saw. When we get to those edge cases, it can give us some guidance on what we believe is being done. And if we have that guidance, what we believe we can do as commissioners is be more consistent across all of us and help the city in avoiding legally arbitrary decisions, which I think is one of the big pieces that's unspoken within our role. How do we ensure that we are bringing in experts, PEs, accredited architects, individuals who have actual experience in this area, and saying, given our experience in this area, this is how the ordinance should be interpreted, and this is how we should be looking at developing new ordinances and how we should be looking at developing future plans to ensure that we are doing what's best for the community given our professional opinions and professional expertise. I do not expect that this document will remain unchanged. I would be shocked if it does, but if it does, I guess that answers which of the outcomes we arrived at. But I do know that right now we need to have the focus of City Council and City Council's direction of staff, or City Manager's direction of staff, apologies, at the recommendation of City Council to put in the effort required to get this, get these into a form that is going to be useful to ensure consistency, transparency, and a lack of arbitrariness within our group and within our community, our development community, everyone else. So that was the purpose behind this, why this arrived, why this first cut as it is. This was done, again, a little backwards. We've already been given our goals and we've been given the taskings. Those have been published and written. This was attempting to fill in those dots. So you'll notice on this document there are certain areas where there is no strategy connecting them, or there's projects that are not listed there. As I attempted to identify, those aren't unimportant, but those are items where I could not see a clear link between the development department's remit and those items. I put in a number of things that may be tangentially associated with development, but I did, but ones I said, hey, this really isn't there, I didn't put it in. So there's nothing in here in any of those tables that is new. Those are all public city-approved contents of city-approved documents. The strategies were written from, whole cloth based on my attempt to actually come up with some logical linkage, and the connections between them were my best guess given those strategies of what those connectors were. So I'm hoping that hits a number of questions folk had, but I'd be happy to either hear that this is useless, not useless, could be improved, whatever it is. in order to help us get, again, to the objective that I hope we can get to, which is consistency, transparency, and avoidance of legally arbitrary decisions that we are going to have our names on the public record with our professional affiliations attached to. That is the objective of this document and what I hope it can be used for.
Thanks, Chris. Does anyone have comment, question, etc.? All right.
Hey, I have a question, I guess. I know that I don't know the ins and outs of the city code, and I feel like I was a little bit confused digesting your document. Like the city website redesign, I feel like that is outside of the scope of this commission, at least to my knowledge, and there's probably several other things on here too. So could you just maybe talk about why some of those things are included? I mean, I guess I could see how, you know, that's, as you're saying, it's informing the community on things, but like, how do we have it, like, I don't think we should have any say in that. Like, that's not our purview, really, right?
Yeah, I don't think so either. But I mean, as far as the city website piece, the reason I have that in there, that's one I think is a tangential, but when you're looking at dissemination of information, when you're looking at the ability to actually reach out and assemble feedback from the community, we've seen that there's been challenges with comment cards and our ability to prove that comment cards, you know, we're pretty sure we're doing it right. I mean, I think the staff does. I think for many of us in our community, we don't have the benefit of living in other places where there's local government runs terribly. The problem with ours running well, and the problem with ours running in the city very well, and the county running really well is, you know, we sort of see little issues as big issues. I lived in Houston. The place is terrible. However, from those pieces, right, we're doing a ton better. But there's indications that we cannot necessarily always prove beyond the public's comfort that a certain thing has happened, and the website redesign is something that is relevant to that action, which is why I left it. But I agree it's tangential. So again, my logic here in the listing of the projects was that if it has any access to being tangentially related, why not leave it? It doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't hurt it to be there, right? It doesn't say that everything in there has to connect. And as I say, there's a lot of white boxes where I'm not entirely sure how the strategy links. The bigger point is, for the ones that we know are there, did we hit the strategies that we've been observing? Are those strategies actually accurate and fair of what's occurring? And are those things that we can use to inform our deliberations when we get those edge cases? So, yeah, I think line by line, there's plenty that could be improved here. This is really the work of, you know, one writer and two other input providers, and we're trying to get input from everyone here. The goal would be to identify, I guess my objective if I'm looking at these types of, this is my daily activity is looking at these items, right? It doesn't mean I do it well, but it means that what I'm hoping at this stage of it is that we're able to look in and say, is there anything in here that's clearly wrong? If it's clearly wrong, sweet, let's stop and fix it. If it's not clearly wrong, we have to be clear that it isn't done. So if it's not clearly wrong, let's at least say, hey, we haven't seen any indication that's wrong. Let's get it to the next level that someone who actually has the time and direction to focus on it can say, well, here's how we make it better. And if we're able to get to the next level of saying, hey, we're going to get better, hopefully it's able to come back to us in a better state if that is possible. I believe it is. So my goal here is, can we actually as a group agree, this isn't wrong? Is it a little confusing? Probably. Is it something that actually could be better written? Easily. But is there anything in here that's wrong, or is it something that's good enough to actually move forward to start a conversation where a large chunk of the work that would have never received sufficient focus is able to actually propel this forward? Again, where this impacts day to day is staff has a ton of things on their plate. we see a very, very small portion. When you look at Plan DSM and the projects that are on there relative to the number of people in that department, relative to the size of our city, that is a massive workload. We have a large backlog at our work, but I provide for our folk, this is the strategy we're going for, this is how we prioritize, and if all of a sudden I get my bear bug and say, I really think we should do this first, they're like, it's not in my plan, I'll get to it, but you gotta stop bothering me about this. We need to be able to provide, and if our role as professionals is to say this is what's important, we need to ensure that those individuals who have the best interests of the city, who have the skills, experience, capabilities to actually move the city forward, are provided access to give, sometimes pushback to say, look, that's not in the strategy, that makes no sense right now, this is what we're focusing on for this reason. This is the type of thing, this is how we actually provide the empowerment of those individuals who are depending on to do way too much relative to the actual resources provided to get the best done on our behalf. That's why I think having this type of document is vitally important. It allows for prioritization work, because right now I've heard, oh, we got 50 priorities a day. You're using the word wrong. That's not how it works. This, I think, will help us allow for those priorities, which will help allow to focus and better use of time, effort, and ensure the outcomes are better, more consistent, and avoids access to legally arbitrary outcomes.
So I guess my question, because there's not a lot of comment, is there an appetite for this type of document in general? And then if there is this a template you'd want to move forward with as a first? So if people want to answer the first one and then the second.
And by forward, I think you mean by some sort of motion and sending this on to council for some sort of action.
Well, that would be if there is.
Yeah, but I just want to make clear that it's not a, oh, let's adopt this as a commission.
Correct. We can't. We don't have authority to do that. Thank you, though, for pointing that out.
So I'll throw this out there is then, so what I think that we're talking about, the scope of what we can do, is so what I would want to be, what I'd want us to do is I would make a motion that the board chair write a letter to city council with this document attached, which identifies this document, reflects the Plan Zoning Commission's understanding of the strategies being pursued by city development staff when attempting to meet the goals of Plan DSM, and requests this document be reviewed and adopted or modified so it can be used to increase commissioner consistency and reduce access to city making legally arbitrary decisions. That's all we can do, is write a letter and say, hey, this is it. Take a look. That's the limit of, that's my understanding, the limit of our authority to say, this is the best, this is what we know isn't wrong, but we need your help, please take a look at it.
And I want to just comment, I don't know that I agree with I appreciate the notion of wanting something to help guide decisions but I think the implying that we're making arbitrary decisions, I don't think is accurate and fair. We have criteria that maybe we should point to it more so, but it's in the staff report. Every time we look at these design alternatives, there's already code-based criteria for how you guys should be making decisions. So if the commission wants, if you're looking for broad, like some sort of summarized, compact document that boils down what goals and missions are, I think that's one thing, but to suggest that we're making arbitrary decisions.
Oh, no. I was not saying that. I'm saying the purpose of this is to avoid access to legally arbitrary decisions. That is not saying we're doing it, right? Again, I've seen places where it seems like they are.
No, we have code criteria as long as we're following the code and hearing public testimony and taking the facts of each unique situation into account. We're not making arbitrary decisions.
Again, I did not say we are. What I'm saying is...
I also don't think that we are setting ourselves up to potentially do that either. I think we have an established process by law to how to process these things. We have public hearings, public testimony. We take that into account and we make a decision. So.
Okay. I'm fine with striking that as well. That's fine, right? So if we can increase commissioner consistency and reduce access to interpretations of arbitrariness, fine, whatever we want to do. If we're saying that fine. Or if we even just change it to say to increase, public transparency and consistent interpretation, fine. That part isn't vital to me. But we don't have a clear statement of these are the strategies being pursued. And as a result, it allows us to get away from, here's how we're going to prioritize, and it doesn't allow us to understand how we can best assist.
Chris, I appreciate the effort that went into this, and I feel like a little bit like I'm sort of admitting something about myself, but I don't get it. I just don't understand the document, and part of it is the inclusion of stuff like just some of the items in here, I mean, they're just line items of things that the city have done, and I mean, supervisor boot camp, I don't know about that. I don't care about that really. And I worry that forwarding this document on in this form can't lead to any further action. So I don't know if it would do us any good at this level of editing, because I'm afraid that if I don't get it, like, how many people are going to get it? And maybe that's an overstatement of my own abilities, but is there any takers on that? Like, anyone want to raise their hand and say they don't get it?
I don't get it.
I think part of the challenge with writing this was, as I look at Plan DSM, I don't see what the strategic linkages are. I think we just got a grab bag of stuff. We got some goals, and it is difficult to try and figure out what is the strategy we're pursuing between these. Why do we have these large lists of things? What are these plans? How do they further our broader strategy? So yes, I think a lot of those pieces, should they be in there? Probably not, but they probably shouldn't be in our plans for Plan DSM as like targets to say we've achieved our goal if there's no strategic linkage to what they are. So I agree with you that yes, there's some tenuous links in here. They're unavoidable because my intention was to say, here's what we've publicly said that we're looking to do in order to get it. We've said we're going to do all these things. If we do them all, it's going to get us to here. Well, why? Why do we think those two things connect? So yes, I agree that a lot of these are hard to make linkages on. This is the first attempt I could make for those. But yes, some of those line items on boot camp, again, my intent was to leave everything in. And if we could say there's a linkage, awesome. But if we couldn't, don't. And if what we're saying is as a group, if there is something where you say, oh, let's cut all these lines don't seem directly relevant, but no problem with that.
What do you think the difference between what Chris is asking for and clarity of what our role in decision making should be based on versus the training that we discussed today having in February? Like, what do you think the goals, where do the goals align or not align between those two statements or topics?
I feel like I've heard that there's a couple purposes to the document or the effort, and that one of those has to do with your decision making and reviewing cases. So I do think that the training that we would do where we kind of refresh, kind of re-walk everybody back through the code-based criteria, the processes do we have, I think that would be of value. Because really, from a legal perspective, that is what we need to be making our decisions on for design alternatives and that sort of stuff. But we're not going to get into just at a commission overview training talking about the city's strategic, like the council's strategic plan or I feel like some of the stuff that, Chris, you've talked about is more actually like implementation and how do you implement a plan that's a broad vision, like a comprehensive plan is a very broad vision. There is some implementation discussion in there, but really how you implement that, it's a long-term plan that's 20, like a 20-year window of ideas, but throughout that process, your council is making individual decisions every year as to how they want to work towards that vision. It's a little different, I think, than a corporate setting. because, it's a political process. And there's changeover on council, there's changeover on perspectives based off of voting. It changes the thoughts in the community. So I guess I see the role of the comprehensive plan as just being maybe a little different, or it's actually intended to be very big picture and broad and not as prescriptive. It's really it's broad vision, and then you make decisions on how you want to get towards it based off the circumstance of where you're at a point in time. But those are just these are very, this is just thoughts as it's bouncing around my mind. So hopefully I've answered your question.
I think so. I think you said that essentially a training of this group would be focused on how to apply the plan and how to look at the requests that come before us for like type 2 design alternatives and things that would be covered, and that's what you think's important to our purview.
Yeah, and definitely like the things we see the most.
Uh-huh.
Right.
I've been trying to form my thoughts here. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a good job or not. I think overall, the items that come before us, we can use the code and we can use the goals and objectives and Plan DSM to figure out what our response should be. My sense is that what Chris is looking for, and maybe some of the rest of us are looking for, is more of the larger sort of urban renewal projects and things like that come before us, and understanding what strategies and priorities are being used and why for those. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I don't know that I don't really want to see this document come back to us in this exact iteration. And I don't personally see a lot of use of having all of the tables and the connecting of everything. That's not very useful to me, but I guess what I would say is it would be useful to understand some of the strategies and priorities that staff has on the larger projects, and even if that does change over time, to understand what's changing and how we need to view that through that lens.
Are you thinking, you started by talking mostly, about urban renewal and that sort of thing. Is that really what you're talking, or is there value in understanding what our tentative work plan for the year, assuming we don't lose staff, like work program stuff, or like our planning division? Is that also what you're looking for? When you talk about what city, staff strategies and
right, not necessarily. Maybe some overarching goals that have a higher priority than others. And I realize that that's hard to say from a planning staff perspective, because pretty much everything ends up being a priority. I get that. It's sort of which way the wind blows, but certainly walkability has been an overarching priority, I think, for the years that I've been on this commission. And it's one of those things that I've just learned through meeting after meeting, but not something that was flat out sort of said, this is a priority.
No, I appreciate it. I think that's a good observation. Excuse me, my eyelashes in my eyeball. I think I can try to figure out how to incorporate that into the training, as far as like what does staff perceive as like the top 10 things we're trying to achieve, kind of thing. In general, when we talk about, just the if I had to boil Plan DSM down and thinking of it in the context of kind of what we normally, like what our role is typically, development review, what, the physical built environment, I would say that Plan DSM and the steps that we've taken, which includes the zoning ordinance in Chapter 135, is the vision is to work Des Moines towards being even more, a more urban form of itself than exists today. So adding density, and when I say that, the things that go along with an urban form or presence is multimodal, walkable, less, auto-oriented. Of course, we recognize, I think that's the big picture vision, but we have a lot of parts of town where things are going to redevelop slowly, and there's going to be baby steps. You don't get there. We all recognize that, you don't necessarily get to your final vision with every project that you see in front of you. It's just always working towards that vision. So I think, example, the last item we had where, you guys kind of came to the conclusion as a group that working down a site towards that vision at this point, 2 driveways instead of 3, So anyway, I guess where I'm going with that is that we have these big visions of where we're trying to head, and we try to make decisions to head us in that way, but we know we can't always just expect a mixed-use building on every corner, and at today, it's a process.
Right there, though, I think is the challenge that I think that we've been stuck in, and why I took this first cut to try and move it. If the tables were intended to be helpful, I'm an engineer, sorry. If we want to cut them, no problem. If they're confusing, fine. But again, within the remit, and what I think most of us signed up for is people who want to be providing the assistance and guidance of experts in our field that allow staff to make the consistent decisions that are going to be transparent and interpretable. In there is overseeing long-range planning, set policy that lead to zoning requirements. That's in the remit, right? And we're just clearly identifying here, right? We're saying one of our goals is densifying the urban form of the city, right? In a way that we hopefully increases tax base. We're not talking about putting a whole bunch of, it's not, was it Ready Player One or anything, right? We're trying to actually densify it in a meaningful, higher value manner, right? Awesome, I'm up with that. Awesome goal, that's what I want to see, right? But we may have the vision, right? For example, one of those pieces of that for me, a significant vision of that is we will end up with a distributed, highly data-dependent workforce. The reality is we can't pay for that. We cannot pay to undo the mess of our undergrounding right now. We just can't do it. But we want to get there, and it doesn't mean we write off the goal. It means we have to be thinking strategically about how we're actually going to do that, right? The actual tasks may be that we say, all right, you have to put in 2 conduits, we own the other conduit. Fine. There may be another task that says we have to actually, redo how undergrounding matters, right? But our strategy in there is going to be, we want to offload the heavy front costs onto the developer, and we also want to make sure that we're using TIF for infrastructure expansion, which, as pointed out today, is now, again, California's the leader in TIF, right? They started in 1954, and back in, I think, 2015 or 16, they changed the rules so you can only use it for public housing infrastructure expansion. West Des Moines, the strategy of TIF usage in West Des Moines is nearly purely all for infrastructure expansion. That could be our strategy. Let's use TIF in the manner that allows us to ensure that our infrastructure expands in a way that enables a distributed, highly dependent workforce is able to use it. That could be a very smart strategy for us, because the reality is we need to get there, but we can't pay for it. What's the strategy for blending those two right now, distant needs and tasks together from, right? If we don't have consistency in strategy, we will not come up with policy that is going to allow us to keep moving towards, as Jason says, we have plenty of tasks. Yes. Can we prioritize tasks? Fine. That's not our remit. We are not the boss of staff, right? We are not supposed to say, hey, show us your priority list. We really think number 3 should be above number 1. No, that's not the point. But providing a clear understanding of strategy, so when these edge cases come in, we can understand, hey, why did this one get 5 hours of consideration, this one get 5 minutes. That is within overseeing long-range planning that allows us to set policy and zoning requirements.
Madam Chair, I understood from Jason that we're going to have a training session sometime fairly soon.
Right, yep.
New Year ways.
New year, just because we only have about 5 meetings left this year, and then, and we're going to maybe have a little more transition with members, so we just want to make sure we have as many new people at the training in the beginning of the year.
That's what I understood as well, and I applaud that. I'm wondering if Chris has raised a number of issues, as we've heard here from the P&Z commissioners, and what would happen if we had, in conjunction with this training session, a few discussions along this line when people have had more of a chance. I haven't read the document.
That's fair. It's very long, and
no, I haven't read it because I get this stuff like this, and I truly, if I looked online, I mean, I'm sure the rest of you got it online, and maybe I didn't get it, but the fact is, I didn't read it. So, you know, and I don't know when it came out. If it just came out with.
Yeah. So but it is quite long. So I think maybe some people didn't have a chance to digest it either. So I completely understand. But I get that you didn't even have it. So, yeah. But your suggestion is giving some more time and now with some feedback.
Yes, at a time that's appropriate.
I guess I would question again, when is appropriate? We were told that these meetings is the appropriate time to have the discussion. Yeah, I think another place would be awesome to have it. I think but I don't think that us keep on moving it is the same thing we did with underground for quite a while. We just keep moving. It was sidewalks before, keep moving it. So I guess the question is, you know, if we motion to say, hey, we're going to put it forward following completion of edits approved by commission chair, that would make some sense too, right? So let's give a final say to someone. Let's allow some pathways for people to actually give feedback back and make sure we have a document that's sufficiently not wrong and appropriate for moving forward. But again, we've been told that until it becomes a priority of staff, it will not go forward. And our only opportunity here is to push it to the point where it's going to be a priority of staff to make sure we're able to get access to the consistent vision of what the strategy is.
Well, Chris, I have another question. And I was gone a couple of 3 or 4 P&Z meetings ago, and so maybe I missed the point. But when at the last meeting, there was a comment that during the director's report, there was also going to be a subcommittee report. And Chris was mentioned as the presenter. So my question is, was there a subcommittee appointed by the P&Z at some time?
It was on February 3rd, 2022. I remember it was my birthday.
Okay. So, you know, I think it would be appropriate for the document, you know, and for everybody, the public included, to know who's on the subcommittee.
It was Johnny, me, and Chris.
That should be included just for, you know, everyone's knowledge.
Yeah, I think Chris said it maybe you were gone though, at the meeting where he said it, so that's fair. Yes, Katie?
I haven't read it either. I don't think I was on the distribution list for that since I am the newest person here, so I'd like to see a copy of it. It sounds to me like there's just a lot of questions still. I would feel a lot more comfortable having the training we discussed early next year before we made any decision on this document. I think a lot of us maybe would feel better having some more time to digest it and more training.
Okay. I think I'm getting some head nods. Will hasn't read it. Katie hasn't read it. Andy's a lost cause. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
I just want to step in because I was part of the committee. Just to provide some feedback from everybody's comments tonight. It sounds like there are some overarching themes that, again, we want to know what the strategies are behind some of these larger projects. We're not specifically talking about code or chapter 135 or 134. but more along the lines of urban renewal, TIF, the larger items where they just appear on our agenda randomly. We think it's randomly. We know that there's a lot of work that goes behind that, but we don't know what's driving those conversations behind closed doors. So what I'm trying to say is, I'm not trying to take a long time here talking, but perhaps it is good for all of you to take a look at the document that Chris has put together and provide some ways to make this easier to read. Maybe avoid the tables. I know they are confusing. I thought they were confusing. I had to go over them multiple times in order to get them, but I ultimately got them because the strategies. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the document, but we can have this conversation again as to what would be the best method to share this message. Because I do think that there is a lot of merit behind this work, that we have a lot of questions that come up about how are these decisions being made. Again, I'm not talking about the things that are laid out in front of us that any of us have access to, but we're talking about how is our strategy for affordable housing and the middle housing that we all talk about, how are we pushing that forward? We don't know. How are the urban plans coming in front of us? Who's making the decisions to prioritize this area over that area? And the answer may very well be the city council member, right? Like he told the city manager and the manager told staff. But we just want to know, I think it's what it comes down to, how are these decisions being made? And if we need to simplify this document in order to get the conversation rolling, then I don't see any issue with, taking another 2 weeks or whatever the case may be. But when we talk about the responsibilities of the commission, I don't think that training is going to get us to a different point in January or whenever it is that we're having this training. Because we're going to come back to the table and say, okay, well, now that we're all trained, what do we think about this document, which is where we're at right now. That's just the 2 cents that I had. If we need to make a document that's readable and that we all can understand, or any person in the public can understand, what does this document aim to achieve, then we can all put our heads together as a commission and say, okay, well, we can rally behind this because anyone is going to understand what we're trying to achieve.
I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the idea that if we have specific questions about what urban renewal is supposed to do and why it's going to be on Southeast 14th now, or why it was on Drake last spring, or why the project last week gets to have a curb cut and this one doesn't, and like how that logic is sort of moves from project to project or case to case, or like those glimpses that we get every 2 weeks. And if we can get a better view into that, it might help us be more consistent. Like I'm 100% behind that investigation or that line of inquiry. But I think in order to get there, you've got to separate out a lot of the chaff from the charts, basically. I mean, if it's 2 or 3 things we care about, or that we're curious about, or that feel like we're not able to vote on properly because we don't know enough, then I think let's drill down on those.
If I could add one other point, 4 or 5 or 6, or I don't know, longer ago, P&Z had on I think it might have been on a quarterly basis, actually a meeting of commissioners with the city manager. And so whenever, the hot issue happened to be, or whatever the commissioners wanted to discuss with the city manager, he was there. It was an informal session, and it was just a good way to share concerns and to hear what, the spokesman for the city had to say. So that might be, another tool that might work.
Yeah, that was still going on when I started in 2019. Maybe 2020 ruined that effort, but it would be, I agree, a good thing to start up again.
Would, as a friendly amendment to the idea, I mean, what about a work session where we can actually sit down, focus on this, and actually go through and identify what it is, right? If what we're saying is, Andy's confused by boxes, which is an architect, so I'm confused by that, right? So, I mean, if you're confused by boxes, right, let's cut them all, right? If part of it is, hey, I don't agree with this one, or I'm missing this piece, sweet, let's sit down together and work on this, right? Having individual conversations, because we can't have a group discussion and collaboratively work on something, is very, very difficult. And we will end up pushing this down the road for years and years with no improvement and no ability to achieve an outcome. So if we could do a work session, right? And again, the purpose of us doing this in isolation within the subcommittee, so the subcommittee of Emily, Johnny, and I, was to take the burden off of staff, not to add hours onto the day, and make sure we could figure out, okay, can we crack this puzzle? This is our first shot at it. But it'd be great to have a work session where we actually sat around, looked at a language specifically, and either work through it structurally and say, okay, we're going to cut all the chaff, and now we're going to actually work on the meat of it, and here's what the meat is, and we collaboratively develop the document. That would be highly, highly useful. But again, I would echo the other comment from Johnny's. I mean, I think most of us have sat through the training. The training is on the procedures of this. There is not a strategy document, so we will not be trained on a strategy document that does not exist. We're going to have to make the document if we want to be able to be trained on it.
Todd, did you have I just saw your hand up.
No, I'm
You're good.
I'm beyond the comfort of this chair. So
Oh.
I think that, plans are messy. I'll put it that way. I've been on various boards and commissions with the city, and if our intent is to ever understand how projects, renewal plans, TIF, tax abatement are ever applied to a project, and we want to have some authority over that and use it to guide our decisions, good luck. Because developers will stop coming, plans will stop coming. We're going to kill all of the effort that's behind Plan Des Moines, in my opinion. Plan DSM, whatever we want to call it. There has been a lot of plans. There's another plan for downtown. I've lived here 33 years, and I've seen so many plans for downtown. Some of them stick, most of them don't. Part of them get implemented, some of them don't. I don't understand the process by how that works. I don't want to. I'm just glad that some of it does. I read the document, Chris, 3 times. I emailed you today. I'm like Andrew. I don't get it. Before we move it much further, I got to understand that there's a problem at the staff level. I need somebody from staff, somebody from council, or somebody to say, look, this just isn't working. You guys aren't doing your job. I need to understand it. I can't support sending this to council in its current form because I don't understand it. I don't understand what the problem was that drove us to form a subcommittee. I was pretty new at the time. And it was your birthday, so I was excited for you. So there's a lot of this that, I think we got to give it time. We got to understand it. Council, like Jason says, is going to change. We're going to change. I think when we debate issues here, there's a lot of things in the zoning code that I obviously just don't agree with. I'll let you know about that when it comes time. There are projects that we hold up because the guy doesn't want to put a sidewalk in. There are projects we hold up because somebody doesn't want underground power. There are projects that we hold up because we want cute little fences in the right-of-way. When we slow the process down, it kills development. It kills the plan. And I'm a true believer in, the theory of Occam's razor. The simplest way is the most precise and direct way of solving a problem. And I just think I'm getting pulled into territory where it's making everything so much more confusing for me. That when I can't think through an issue clearly, and we can't debate it clearly, and I don't even know what the problem is that leads to a document like this, why am I here? It makes, I want to make Des Moines a better place. What is the plan intended to do? It's to make the place better for human beings, for people to live in Des Moines. It's not to make the plan better. It's not to make the piece of paper better. It's not to make the more dense environment better. It's to make it better for us. And if the process gets so convoluted and messy, yeah, I don't want to be a part of it. So and this chair is really getting uncomfortable, so that's.
To Todd's point, though, one of the items is where we say there's elements of the ordinance that we don't agree with. There's elements of the ordinance that I don't agree with either. But what is the actual rationale for changing them, right? What should the ordinance be if we're going to attain those goals within our capability of driving that change? We must have a strategic vision to understand which ones are there, right? 135.372 is my big one, right? It's a one-sentence throwaway that could be so much more. Why is it only what it is, right? Why can't we use that to strategically identify that we do want distributed local agriculture here? What's the strategy for that? Well, why aren't we doing that? If we're going to be able to, I think we have plenty of items we believe are problems. The question is, well, what were we trying to achieve? Can we clearly articulate what the strategy is that we have in place that's identifying these tasks based on our goals? And if we can do that, we don't slow the process up, we speed it up, because we don't have to debate every time, well, why is this building get that, and get that? The strategy is, hey, this falls within our remit of X. And therefore, yeah, it looks like an edge case, but no, this is it, so we all agree on that, cool. It actually speeds up development, provides more predictability to developers, and allows them to understand in the course of the years it takes to develop these long-term processes and to develop these ordinances, what we're going for. I agree aggressively. Strategic plans change. It's recommended they're reviewed every quarter, if not half year. Fine. We don't have one. We got to start somewhere. Is it going to change? Yes. But you don't change from zero. Change from something. That's the purpose. And the purpose is to speed up, to reduce the opportunity for that inconsistency between elected officials, between us, between those staff, that's going to allow a developer to say, that's too risky because I don't have a ground to stand on for this long-term big project, right? If we're really going to go grow, a massive farm on the south side of the railroad tracks, which isn't proposed anymore, but or maybe it still is, who knows, right? But if that's going to go there, that's going to take millions of dollars and lots of time to do. How do you have the consistency and direction that we have that it falls within a strategy we're going to keep pursuing regardless of the person? So it's ironically echoing exactly what Todd is looking for us to do. Long-term predictability with access to investment, because we know the strategies that will still may modify, but will still be able to drive a more often changing individual or specific rule or specific project. Those will always change. And if we don't have consistency over which next project's next, that is the real problem, is the long-term investment in the big visions. We can't get a big vision if we're always worried about the little ones. And again, it's within the remit, overseeing long-range planning to set the policy and zoning requirements.
Okay, so I think everyone's getting a little, I'm looking at faces and tired. And some people haven't read the document, and I want to recognize that because I don't want anyone having to vote on something they haven't read. So I want to get to somewhere tonight where we can say, this is what we're doing, this is how we're moving forward or not moving forward. And I want to do that more quickly than not, because I think people are tired. So do we want to just delay, want to do a training in the beginning of the year? What are the thoughts there?
I would like to do a work session before the end of October, or before the end of October.
End of October is in like 10 days.
So, okay. How about the end of November?
Yeah, I don't think that's
Can we do a work session before the end of November?
Katie.
Is that a motion? Are you making a motion or something, or?
I guess I made a motion earlier
that.
ideas now? Yeah, I made a motion earlier.
If you're expecting a staff presentation, we're going to need to look at our workload and get back to you.
I don't want a staff presentation. I want a plan and zoning work session where we actually work on this document, figure out if we as a group can work towards an agreement on what there is.
Are you talking about a subcommittee that's less than quorum?
I don't even want to get there. Is there even, I guess my main question, is there even an appetite to have a document like this? Are people wanting that? If they're not wanting that, we're not going to waste everyone's time. That's my first question. If there is, then we can go into the how. Todd does not want the document, right? It sounds like. I have input from a few.
Should we just vote on whether or not we want to move forward with a document like this? That'd be.
Can we vote on, can we do
Well,
that?
I think that's a great way for you to quickly understand people's appetite.
Okay. So I guess the motion,
Just a
This
question. I mean, we're
question.
not really,
it's not a real motion.
right,
Okay.
right. I mean, this is just a way for you to organize your discussion. So if you want to further this discussion,
If you want to further this discussion, please raise your right hand. Okay, so there's 3 people. So I think then we're not moving forward. So I think Chris, and I mean, from my understanding, from talking to Jason, from talking to city staff, from talking to city councilmen, I've talked to everyone in this community about this, and people, if they do have an issue, they can always take it to city council themselves. You can always go to a public meeting, just like anyone can come to this public meeting and speak. So that is an avenue, correct, Jason? Yeah. So, all right, thank you.
Stand up.